I've been pumping his tires ever since the series started, so I haven't heard anyone. And one nice thing he had to say about me.
I didn't realize it was my job to pump his tires. I guess I have to apologize for that.
How difficult it is to play a shot off the end boards and comes from a weird angle, goes off Tim's body. Just how hard it is.
It's not hard if you're playing in the paint, so it's an easy save for me, but if you're wandering out and aggressive like he does, I mean, that's going to happen. So he might make some saves that I won't, but in cases like that, I mean, we want to take advantage of bounces like that and make sure that we're in a good position to bury those.
How about a shot fired across the bow from Roberto Luongo?
Not very subtle there. Kevin, is that not against goaltender union policy?
Wow. That was tangy.
Tangy. His contract sucked. One of the most controversial figures in Vancouver sports history probably, has retired this week and left the Vancouver Canucks with a bit of a bitter pill to swallow for some fans. What is the legacy of Roberto Luongo? What shall we remember about Roberto Luongo? And should the Vancouver Canucks have dealt with this cap recapture penalty? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Ben Hutton. We're going to talk about Tyler Myers and Ryan Spooner and a whole bunch of other things on Agree or Disagree the Podcast Hockey Edition, as it has been another fascinating week in the world of Vancouver Canucks hockey. I am joined by Sean. How are you, Sean Holmesmith?
I'm doing quite well, Kevin.
Good. And Tyler, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Back up north, back into the weirdness of the weather, going rain and sun and thunder, and we've had it all this week.
Yeah, well, it was weird. You know, I didn't see any strange people on my couch this weekend, so it was...
No.
You know, the weather this weekend here in Vancouver has
Not
been...
a lot of rain, a lot of sunshine, and the weather's been really mild, so it's been really nice.
Yeah, so it's been pretty much... It was pretty much that.
Good pull.
This has been this is probably one of the more fascinating weeks I can remember in me living out here. This is probably, I would have to say, in the top three. The Trevor Linden leaving was the most intriguing, but this was probably 2 or 3 because if there was. It's the week that Jim Benning could do no right. We were arguing about, like, you know, we'll get into this a little bit later, but why didn't Jim Benning acquire Colin Miller? Why didn't Jim Benning acquire Andrei Burakovsky? Why can't Jim Benning part the Red Sea? But we have to start with one of the bigger names in Vancouver sports history. Not as big as someone in the Daily Hive has claimed, but he's certainly up there. What about Roberto Luongo will you remember, or what are your thoughts? When I say the name Roberto Luongo, what do you think?
Best goalie the Canucks have had in franchise history. He struggled with, I think he struggled with the limelight when he first came over, and then opened up later on. But and then just his contract was such a. I'm blown away that I'm still blown away that the NHL still managed to come up with this retroactive punishment for contracts that were just using the might of the financially strong NHL teams, and yet they still don't have. Yet they because they say it was a quote unquote circumvented the cap. But if you look at all these NHL teams in Texas, Florida, Seattle, one that comes in with these low to like to none income tax states, how is that not any different? How is that not any different in terms of creating a unfair competitive advantage? So with Luongo, it's very much him being such an amazing player, such an amazing personality, and then having to deal with the fallout from basically having a contract that quote unquote circumvented the cap?
For me, with Roberto Luongo, I mean, I agree. He's definitely the best goalie the Canucks have ever had. I think the big memory that's the thing that stands out for me is the personality. You know, it was his relationship with the fans in Vancouver was up and down. I think in the end, it was the fans have regarded him very well. It's been an outpouring of congratulations on his career and all that kind of stuff now. But he was an interesting figure. You know, he was. We heard some of the clips there from the 2011 Stanley Cup Final off the top here, and when he was great, he was, you could say, the best in the game. When he was a little off his game, it was leaving people scratching their heads. But there's no doubt that Luongo ranks highly in Vancouver Canucks history.
Yeah, it was pretty much. It was an interesting relationship because it certainly sounded a lot like this.
So this are the
No, they're saying Boo Earns. Boo Earns.
Are you saying Boo Earns? I was saying Boo Earns.
I had to. I had to pull that out. But it was a lot of. There was some fans that were that really loved him, and some fans that really, like, at the start he was really not. He was standoffish to the media. But I mean, I think it was really after 2000. It was almost after 2011 that after the Stanley Cup Final, that he started to gain a little bit more love and respect, I guess.
Well, with the 2011 final, the initial reaction from the fan base was to blame Luongo for giving up so many goals in Boston and in Game 7. But once the cooler heads prevailed and you looked at what happened, is that the Canucks were just out of gas. They couldn't score. Like, it was just a whole...
The power play really let them down.
And the power play, yeah. And Luongo basically stole Game 6. Game 5 in Vancouver, when it was 1-0. They won 1-0, and Luongo stole it. So it's one of those things where I really think the fan base, the farther we got away from the heartbreak of 2011, the more Luongo was championed as opposed to villainized in terms of how he played that in those playoffs and all that. So it's just, I think it was, definitely a combination of vilification and champion. But I really think that he's going to end up being considered the best goalie that the Canucks have ever had, and should have his number retired.
I don't feel he's at the jersey retirement level myself, but I think that's just a little bit because of kind of how things ended. But then again, I mean, Pavel Bure's up there, and that didn't end very well either with the Canucks. So I guess the other somewhat awkward part about it is Kirk McLean wore number 1. He was well liked as well, and part of a Stanley Cup run for the Canucks. But Ring of Honor for sure. I don't know. If you did a survey out there on whether his jersey should be retired, I think you'd get some mixed results there.
There was some mixed results. There has been suggestions that Luongo and McLean go up. They both retire, both of them at the same time, as an honor and number 1, which I think is interesting. I don't know. I think that's. I don't. He wasn't on the level of the Sedins. I can't put him there. I mean, I know that there was a blogger in the Daily Hive that suggested it's comparable to Sedins, and it's not, because this, at the Botsford Tribute, someone actually asked why the Canucks never traded the Sedins, and there was such a loud boo. I was surprised that the man was. I'm not sure the man was able to get out of the Commodore Ballroom. So there's just it's not like. The love for the relationship that this fan base had with Luongo and the Sedins isn't the same. So I don't think you can do the same thing. Maybe you don't retire, I'm using air quotes, you don't retire number one in the sense, but you don't allow someone not to wear it. Does that make
for me, the Sedins are on a different level, and they're getting a full week this upcoming season of celebration, including one night where they're retiring the 22 and 33. Saying that Luongo is at number retirement level doesn't mean that he's on the same level as the Sedins, in my opinion. They're getting a full week of celebration. Luongo, you can say, is on the same level as a Marcus Naslund or a Stan Schmiel, who are great players. Pavel Bure, great players, people who were well liked in the community. With the way Luongo left, I never felt there was as much vilification of him leaving, because people understood why. People understood the mess that the organization was at the time, the mess that everything was, and how he just wanted to go back to be closer to his family as well. And I think there was some understanding to that, as opposed to when Bure just wanted to leave, and then more recently when Kessler basically said, "Trade me because I just don't want to be here anymore." It was more understandable to the general fan of why Luongo wanted to leave.
Yeah. No, that is all entirely correct as far as I'm concerned. The one thing I should note with the Sedins and Schmiel is that, of course, they played their entire careers with the Canucks. And then, so we do have, even Linden, he had a period of time there where he wasn't a Canuck, and his jersey's retired. Naslund, same thing. And so having number one up there wouldn't go against kind of what they've done with other jersey retirements.
No, that's fair. I'm not saying. I definitely think I'm on the opinion you honor him. I know that there's some people that don't want to, because they're a little bit angry about this contract, and we'll get into this contract in a moment here. But I do think was a really interesting connection here, and this becomes another legacy thing, because the man that really, it was partially Luongo himself, and it was partially Twitter and figuring out that Strombone was Luongo, but the man that kind of pushed this out was none other than the late great Jason Botchford. And this is the province released a article that he wrote back in 2014, which had some comments from Kevin Bieksa, which Bieksa said, "What are you going to," when asked what we're going to miss about Luongo, Bieksa said, "I'm going to miss the amount of money I've made on playing cards with him." There's just Botchford. It's funny how Jason, the long-term effects of Jason Botchford, and we'll get into this. There was a snub, but I'll tease that a little bit later. But just really, Botchford had a lot to do with the Canuck fan base really getting to know and loving Roberto Luongo the way that they're, and understanding and bringing out Luongo's humor, because I think that was just one of the things that really I think people appreciated him. The my contract sucks. What he was willing to say. I think his personality was larger than life. And the way he played goal was larger than life. It was, he made some amazing saves. I can't even, think of, there's so many, so.
The other thing is, he's a Hall of Fame. There's no doubt about it.
No.
So can you really say that he's not jersey number retirement level if he's a Hall of Famer, and a big reason why he's a Hall of Famer is his time in Vancouver? That's part of why I think he's up there, is because you look at, that's why Bure is such a good example, is he's a Hall of Famer, and a big reason why he's in the Hall of Fame is because of how his time in Vancouver. So if they've already done it with Bure, they're going to do it with Luongo, and it's more than deserved too.
Yeah. That's fair. I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm not going to. Yeah, for me, it's fine. Either I do think you need to honor him in some way, shape, or form.
I had someone on Twitter suggest to me that any such acknowledgement shouldn't come until the salary cap recapture is completed. What do you guys think of that?
Well, that's
I thought about it. I don't think that they should. I don't think they should wait. But because if we're gonna get right into that contract, it's not his fault. That's not his fault. And if you're putting the blame on Luongo for the recapture and then him retiring as opposed to going on LTIR, that's not his fault either. So holding his feet to the fire and saying they can't do anything until that's off the books is total crap. And it's not understanding the whole story of what happened here.
Yeah, there's a lot that, it's easy to blame Roberto Luongo for this, but it's that, you're right, Sean, it's not really accurate in a lot of ways. It's funny because, I have to, probably in a weird way, one of the best defenders was not necessarily the contract, but getting around the salary cap. And we'll get to this Luongo thing. One of the best defenders of the salary cap, or how people are approaching it or air quoting circumventing around it, was Kyle Dubas this week when he was asked how fair is it that the Toronto Maple Leafs get to front load or add signing bonuses to contracts. And Dubas said, that's too bad. So sad. That's what we get to do. That is our competitive advantage of getting around the salary cap. And this is what Gillis and the Vancouver Canucks were thinking at the time, is if you do this contract this way, it allows you to bring in a Dan Hamhuis, a Keith Ballard, which didn't work out, but other pieces that allows you to compete for a Stanley Cup. It's not Roberto Luongo's fault. That was,
and this went on all over the league. There
absolutely,
were other players.
Yeah, it was the trend of the time. Was it too long? Yeah, it was, but other teams were doing it, so.
And like I said, every team, every market has different competitive advantages, and cherry picking this to say it's circumventing the cap is, and not looking into how to level the playing field for teams that have a higher income taxes versus the teams that have none is it just seems as I said, it's cherry picking based off of what markets you want to help out instead of making it a total proper level playing field.
Yeah, that's right. And you're not gonna, like in this country, I'm sure that you're gonna, the idea of not taxing millionaires for a hockey game is not gonna go over well with a lot of the political base out there. But I mean, that's an advantage that a lot of states and even Alberta. Well, Alberta has doesn't have a GST, but I mean, a lot of states and Las Vegas and a number of places have that other places don't. So I don't know, like every team looks for a little bit of an advantage. Now, in the long run, I guess the question then becomes, this could have been worse, because this could have been if Luongo did not. Well, before we get to that, the other thing is Florida asked him to retire, not to go on LTIR. It was Florida that said you need to retire because they're going after Bobrovsky and Panarin, and they need all the money that they can get for that to happen, right? So that's the Florida Panthers is really, you can't even blame Luongo for that. It was Florida that did that. But you can't really, what was I going to say? Forgot my train of thought. The point is this isn't like, Luongo signed the pen to paper, he got paid, but this ultimately isn't Luongo's doing, and I don't think punishing this guy for a situation in a really weird rule that is, in a lot of ways, it is BS. I don't think punishing Luongo for 3 years is necessarily going to solve the problem.
I think people have lost sight of the bigger picture here. 2012-13 season lost half a season due to collective bargaining agreement negotiation. And it was part of the agreement. It was included in the CBA to get a deal done, this cap recapture thing. And it is what it is. And there's certain people trying to make the arguments, well, there's this way of getting around it or whatever, and other teams have done this or that. And I don't know, I think you're just reaching for material there. It's pretty clear that it was part of the CBA to reclaim some of those salary cap dollars that were in the old CBA that didn't work for the economics of the game from the league side of it.
So Tyler
didn't work. I'm sorry, Tyler, but
that's how they see it, right?
Yeah. When you look, they said when you look at how things are competitive advantage for a team in Canada, and as a strong financial team that way, they can do it this way, and then you've got teams in Tampa or Vegas where they don't have state income taxes, and you get dings that way, right? Like you can use that to be a competitive advantage that way. Each market has it, and then to cherry pick which one is circumventing the cap and which one isn't, just seems really weird to me. And the fact that now Cap Friendly has a income tax estimate calculator says everything you need to know about how much of these how much, what the difference is. Because I've got this now, and I pulled up for $7 million, the actual rate of taxation for Vancouver, and the actual money that comes out of it is the net income for a $7 million contract is $3.5 million, just over $3.5 million in Vancouver. In Tampa, it's over $4.2 million. That's significant. So, and then you throw in on top of that your agent fees, your escrow. They're going to want as much money as possible. So to say that, like, front loading a contract up so that you can lower the salary cap figure for a team is cap circumvention, but a team that has a lower tax rate, so they don't have to pay a player as much, and then they can still add players afterwards. That's cap circumvention as well, in my opinion.
I mean, it's the league would say, well, we don't control tax regimes, but it's still not. It still speaks to the idea of the salary cap was supposed to level the playing field, and what you're saying, Sean, is that it's not a level playing field because taxation is not the same from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and it's a valid point. I mean, teams can use that as an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is going to be interesting is what happens with Nashville. Because of that Shea Weber trade, they are going to have a cap recapture penalty of $24.57 million. And when the new CBA comes, it'll be interesting to see what they do with this. Because if you're going to be consistent, if you're going to punish Vancouver for this, I think it's fair game to punish Nashville for this, but you think that they're going to actually punish Nashville for $24 million?
It all comes down to how the player retires. And that's another complete and utter bullshit thing that is with this cap recapture is that there are ways around it. And then if a team that, because Luongo was traded away and Florida's like, no, we don't want you to go on LTIR. We want you to do it this way. So then a team arbitrarily gets punished differently from other teams. So it all comes down to how he retires, and who knows at this point.
Yeah, it'll be. Yeah, it's going to be interesting how that is going to happen. But I think there's more to be said. At least the positive about this And as Jim Benning says, it happened now and not in a couple of years from now, when you have to pay Pedersen and probably Hughes and a couple of other people, where it's going to hit. It's not helping now, and it's not going to. Yeah, it's not helping now, but and it's certainly an interesting crunch because the big story, one of the big stories, and one of the quite likely things that is possibly going to happen is the signing of Tyler Myers. And depending on what that contract is, and some are saying it's going to be 7x7, others are saying there's no way it's going to be 7x7. That's going to be a really important, interesting part of this conversation, what that is, and how the Canucks can move forward. So I guess the question is here. The question I have is, what would you want? What would be a good signing of Tyler Myers? And the second question that I have, I'm just going to bring this up now. Does Tyler Myers at this point in time have a really good shot at being a veteran, have a really good shot with this Canuck fan base?
I don't think he does. Well, I think there's with the Canuck fan base, it's basically been split in terms of you have the people who want to see competitive hockey year in and year out and are pretty positive thinking in terms of what happens. Then you got the people who are the fans who are a little more engrossed,
frustrated.
I'm engrossed in the stats and how things are done and the process, and they're a little more on the negative side because Benning and the Canucks have not followed the quote-unquote proper way of a rebuild. And you've got those people are going to not be on the Myers side, and they're going to bring up every time he makes a mistake, every time he has a bad game, they're going to bring up this contract. And that, so in that aspect, and those people are usually the more vocal fans that you hear on Twitter, on the radio, anywhere that they can get a voice, they're going to spout it. And I think that, yeah, because of that, it's going to be tough for Tyler Myers to come into Vancouver and make a good splash with the fan base, unless he comes in and plays like a legit top four defenseman and is being paid less than $6.5 million per year.
I would just add to that, the fans probably aren't going to be satisfied unless they're a playoff team with him. You know, yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, we're at the point, Kevin, where it seems like it doesn't matter if they sign anybody; it's going to be met with negative reception from a good portion of the fan base. I'm on the side of it, like, you know, bring in good players. Whether you draft them, develop them, trade for them, sign them, you know, bring in good players and assemble a good team. It's hard to do. Teams sometimes get themselves into trouble with free agency because there is a bidding war that goes on for certain players, and you end up having to pay too much. But you know, do you want a good team or not? You know, we're into the entry level deal of Elias Pettersson. You're number 2. You know, you're starting to have to give the younger players raises. I mean, Brock Besser needs a raise. Pretty soon we're going to be seeing other people get raises. So it's do the Canucks just continue to keep aiming for the lottery here, or are they going to like actually build a good team here at some point? You know, you could use the argument a couple of years ago. No, it's not the time to bring on veterans. It's time to let the kids play. But I think the Canucks are past that.
Yeah, it's unfortunately with the way Jim Benning has done this, and like I said, the vocal side of the fan base is more negative on and hasn't been happy with the lack of extra draft picks and assets that don't depreciate in value once you acquire them, like most players do into the organization. And because of that, when you see the prices of the Colin Miller trade and the Andre Burakovsky trade, the Canucks couldn't afford those because they still need to keep as many draft picks as possible, especially now that they have given up a first-round pick in one of the next 2 years. So that again, Jim Benning unfortunately has reached a point in his tenure as a Canucks GM where he's in a no-win situation. He doesn't make a move, he's going to get vilified because he didn't make a move and didn't make the team better when they have to make the playoffs in the next 2 years. If he does make a move, he's going to get vilified because he's probably going to overpay, because quote unquote overpay, because based off of what the fan base is looking for from each player, and so it's just like he's not going to become someone looked at with the benefit of the doubt. No, like if you look at the JT Miller trade, and when you look at the prices that Colin Miller got and Andre Burakovsky got, JT Miller is a much better player. And you paid a first and a third for him. I think that's fair value.
And at first, that in all likelihood won't be a high in the first round pick.
If everything goes as planned, that first should be a 20 or later first.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at that, but people just see the first round pick and it's red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag, especially when the Canucks haven't made the playoffs in 4 years. Yeah. So it's just, yeah. If the Canucks had lined up a schwackload of picks and had been able and had more second and third round picks more specifically, and maybe an extra first, I think fans would have been a lot more receptive to a deal like that, because the pipeline still is going to be fed, and you're not you're not necessarily sort of handcuffing yourself into 2 years of needing to be competitive. So it's just the way he's handled things that hasn't lined up with the way the general public / quote unquote learned hockey fan is looking for in a rebuild.
I just want to add one more thing on this topic. Since the draft, people are really impressed with how the Colorado Avalanche look. And, what a turnaround it's been for them since they had I think it was a 49-point season a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. So I'm guessing people wanted to see the Colorado approach to managing the Vancouver Canucks. But, seriously, can you imagine if the Canucks had a 49-point season and they were in last place by a mile? Can you imagine how that would actually go? People would be, people want everybody in the organization gone, like everybody. Stan Smila, go down the list. Like it would just be the fire that would be shooting out every day would be insane. There's just no way, in my opinion, that they could ever take that approach.
If you could see where the future was, I think this fan base would understand. But that's the biggest problem with where they're at right now is you're not exactly sure what that future looks like. Yes, there's some absolutely fantastic players in the organization and coming up through the system, but it's people are finding it frustrating because they don't. The other thing is, like, with the amount of analytics and stats like that are coming out to show, quote unquote, how good a player is, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of people are taking a lot of these stats by way too seriously, as opposed to, like, with Tyler Myers. For me, yes, his possession stats aren't great, but they're not bad. His wins above replacement stats and all these other, like, more like complicated stats, people see that and say wins above replacement. Okay, so therefore they don't look into what goes into those stats, because I honestly think a lot of these stats are still being tweaked and fixed, and someone's wins above replacement formula is different from another's. So people not really looking into that and just taking that by gospel is really hurting allowing people to have a good discussion about how good a player is. Because Tyler Myers, despite his quote unquote bad underlying analytics, still put up 30 points last year. And I think that's one thing that is getting lost in these arguments, is that you still need to produce. It was the same argument with Nikolai Goldobin last year with the Canucks. Yes, his possession stats are great. Yes, his zone entry stats are great. But why isn't he producing? So you need to find that right balance, and I think that's something that people don't quite understand yet in terms of how to build a team properly and have the right ingredients. You need to have this. Every team seems to have the same number and same type of ingredients. It's just it's different for each team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's listening to Ian Clark talk about how the 7 key things that each elite goaltender has is very similar to the argument I just made in the fact that it's always a little bit different from each goaltender, and it's always a little different from each team. And you need to find, and just because you have 1 or 2 overpaid players doesn't mean you're screwing your team up. It just means that you have to find value in other areas.
Yeah, that's the Toronto Maple Leafs approach, right? I mean, they're paying a couple of guys some pretty mega dollars, and we might have one more contract like that signed here pretty soon. But still, they feel they're getting good value in other places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Tyler Myers, let's face the biggest question here amongst everything else. Take the contract away, take everything else away, take the analytics away. Just look at the eyes, at the eye test of what you have seen in the Vancouver Canucks defense last year. Is Tyler Myers an improvement to what they have? And the answer unequivocally, unquestionably, is yes, especially on the right side. So to me, on the basis of that, I think you have to give him a shot. Like, all these fans that think that you can get some sort of, why can't you go lower here and things like that, you can't. It's not necessarily that easy to do, right? Like, people.
Yeah, they work in a bubble.
Yeah,
they think in a bubble that you're working with a computer from NHL, whatever year they're playing.
Yeah,
and you can make that trade.
Yeah, it's not that easy, and there's things that Tyler Myers has to think about as well when he's making this contract, and what does he want, right? So, yeah, sometimes you're going to have to go a little bit over what you really want to do. But on the ultimate test here is the fact of the matter is, unequivocally, Tyler Myers improves the defense. So on that basis alone, it's a good signing. Now, 7x7 is probably a lot. I will grant that. That might be a little bit over what I would pay, but it doesn't mean... I also don't know if I would avoid signing a guy like this.
Yeah, look at. I mean, to remind people right now. I mean, signed for next year. They have 7 defensemen signed for next year. Okay, Edler, Tanev, Stetcher, Hughes, Biega, Brisebois, Sautner. I mean, most of the time on the active roster, you carry 8. So they need defense. And would people rather have Ben Hutton or Luke Shen or Josh Tevez or Brogan Rafferty? I mean, they're all guys they tried last year. Derek Pouliot, everybody's done with Derek Pouliot. Yeah. That's what it looked like last year. So, yeah, I mean, you got to, at some point, go for it with somebody. For me, I mean, it'd be sweet if they could get a guy like Tyler Myers on a 4-year deal, but that seems unrealistic.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that people have to sort of put into their equations of what is a good contract, what is a bad contract, and all that, is that in 2 years, the American national broadcast rights are up for renewal, and that's going to be a big deal. That is going to bump up the salary cap significantly in 2 years. So whatever you're paying Tyler Myers here, and as long as it's not absolutely exorbitant, it's going to look a little bit better in 2-3 years. And as long as he doesn't completely dive off take a dive and lose his skating and all that, which is a legit worry with Tyler Myers, and I have no issue paying him a little bit more for a shorter term because of that. But then that's the worry about the 6 to 7 year deals that we're hearing, is that in those 2 to 3 years at the end of the contract, what type of player do you have with him? Are you going to have a Zdeno Chara type player who's become a beast physically and conditionally and condition wise, and is still able to put in like number 4 or 5 defenseman minutes, or are you seeing someone who's basically not that much better, not that much better than what you have in the AHL? So that is the legit worry from signing Tyler Myers that I think is a fine worry to have. But yeah, if the Canucks can get, the other thing with that is, how do you structure the deal? We'd go back to front loading it as much as you possibly can under the terms of the CBA, and make it so that, yes, his cap hit is 6.5, but for the last 2 to 3 years of the contract, the actual money he's getting is $3 million or something like that, where you'd be able to trade him away to a team that needs to get to the cap floor or somewhat like that at a much cheaper real dollars rate than what you need, what other teams would need. It makes it easier to move on from him later on in the deal. So going based off of term and cap hit alone, again, you're going to have a little. You're going to skew your opinion one way or another, and you're not going to have a full picture. That's the problem with the CBA and the hard cap right now, is that there's so many nuances that you have to look at to decide whether or not a player's contract is good or bad.
Yeah. And, it's going to be, it'll be fascinating. I mean, we haven't heard any other team, or I haven't heard any other team other than Vancouver be involved in that. So when Monday happens, we'll hear what that contract is going to be, and we will know then, and then there'll be that sort of discussion. Quickly here, were you surprised? With Ben Hutton and Granlund not being re-signed by the team or getting a qualified offer?
I'm not surprised with Granlund, a little bit with Hutton, but I think part of what happened with Hutton was the Luongo recapture.
Yeah.
I think once they found out that was coming down the pipe, they realized that there wasn't really much they could do in terms of bringing Hutton back at a rate that would be good for them and good for Hutton, and they didn't want to go down the arbitration route with Ben Hutton, because if he got that $3.5-4 million, they wouldn't be able to walk away from it, because the rules are if an arbitration award is less than $4.4 million, then the team can't walk away from it. So it's the salary cap recapture really paid was a big reason why they walked away from Hutton.
I'd also say not a surprise with Granlund, but a bit of a surprise with Hutton, I would say, in regards to Hutton, just because it seemed like he had a bit of a bounce-back year last season compared to the year before. The arbitration eligibility there is a very good point that you make there, Sean. I think as well, they just don't see long-term Hutton fitting in their top four, I guess. So they've just said, okay, well, we're moving on. I think that's part of the thinking.
Mm-hmm. You've got Edler and Hughes on the left side. You've got Hugh Levy coming up. You've got Sotner, who played it decently for them at the end of the year. Breezebob played okay. And then they were looking at bringing in someone maybe even bigger, a little more physical for that bottom pair to role as well. So like a Jordy Ben or a Patrick Nemeth were the two names that were being bantied around as players that the Canucks might be interested in. So I think they're looking to get a little bigger, a little more physical on the blue line, and with Hughes, Hugh Levy, Edler all around or coming up or around for the next 2 years, there wasn't room for Hutton.
And should be noted, Hutton was a Gillis draft pick, not a Benning draft pick, so probably in their mind a little easier to move on from. I always believed that. Sometimes the manager's a little more married to their own draft picks than the ones that came before them.
That's fair. The only draft pick remaining in the Gillis era is Bo Horvath.
I believe so. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I believe we'll get into bold predictions here in a quick second, but I do believe Ben Hutton is going to get an NHL contract somewhere next year.
Oh yeah, he will.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's quickly talk about. We got Cory Hergott coming up here. We're going to do as a separate podcast. We're going to talk about Canucks Development Camp, but we do have a couple of other quick things that we want to get to here before we get into bold predictions. We do need to talk a little bit about the Hall of Fame. That was announced this week. Haley Wickenheiser was a name. I don't think that anybody would argue that Haley Wickenheiser should be a Hall of Famer, and I think that was absolutely well-deserved. Sergei Zubov finally got into the Hall of Fame. I think that there was a lot of people that were very wonder when that was exactly going to happen. We also got a couple other names. We got Jim Rutherford got in there as well, a coach in just pulling up the names here. Jerry York also got in as well, and a name may not be familiar with a lot of people in Canada, but well-known coach in the States. And Vaclav Nedemski also was elected. May not have been well-known, but for older fans, they know who he is. But the one that was a little bit more controversial was Guy Carbonneau. He 3-time Selke Award winner, Stanley Cup winner twice with Montreal, once with Dallas. A lot of people were scratching their heads with this. I know one person on this podcast was. I don't know where Tyler sits on this, but kind of quickly your thoughts on the Hall of Fame.
Well, yeah, she's the headliner for sure, and as soon as she retired, it was just counting down the days until she was inducted. She's Canadian royalty for hockey. Rutherford he's done a good job. He's got now 3 cups, two with Pittsburgh and one with Carolina.
Yep. And
then Nemansky was like one of the first defectors from Eastern Europe over to North America to play hockey. So that's trailblazing. That's important. I don't know too much about Gary York, but I'm sure it's nice to see other than NHL people get in on the builders side and the players side as well, because I think that's something that needs to be recognized. With Guy Carbonneau, I just think that the Hall of Fame should be for full on generational play. Like if you were to list off your top 10 players from the 80s and 90s, does Guy Carbonneau make that list? And he doesn't, in my opinion. So that's why I don't think he should be in there. But based off of the who they have let in the past, he's more than deserving. I just wish they would hold it at a higher standard.
Yeah, I think they're all great choices, including Guy Carbonneau. Won cups with two different teams, won 3 cups, captained the Montreal Canadiens. That's no easy task any day. And I just think it's nice to see that a defensive forward, and made a great career out of that, gets recognized. So it does raise some questions about what the bar for eligibility really is. But no, I think he's deserving to be in there. And I just want to say Jim Rutherford. Same thing. What a manager he's been. 2 cups with Pittsburgh, 1 with Carolina. Still going, still doing it, still fielding competitive teams. So that's nice to see him go in the builders category. And then obviously Wickenheiser's a given. That was an easy selection, that one.
Yeah. For me, I have no issues with anybody, including Guy Carbonneau. He's one of the best on the defensive side to play the game. I think just in terms of the argument in the NFL has always been, is he part of the fabric of can you tell the story of the NFL without him? And it's hard to without Guy Carbonneau. I think for those that are questioning it, you just look at the 1993 Stanley Cup final and what he did against Wayne Gretzky, who, yes, he wasn't at his prime, but still was Wayne Gretzky. And the way he dominated him during that Stanley Cup final, and the way he played, to me, there's no question. Now, the question of the standard of what gets into the Hall of Fame, I think, is an absolute fair question because they are not transparent about it. We don't know who votes for who. We don't know who is advocating for who, and I do think that needs to change. I'm one personally that does not think that Eric Lindros would not have gotten my vote to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm also a person that, as a Flames follower, I'll say it, I do not believe that Theoren Fleury should be in the Hall of Fame. I do think that standard should be there, and I think that there's fair questions about that, for sure.
Yeah, it just comes down to how you want the Hall of Fame to be. Is it the Hall of where you're celebrating the best of the best of the best, or just someone who is really good at a certain time, right? So, for me, I just wish they would have a higher standard. But based off of who they've inducted in previous years, I have no issues with Guy Carbonneau going in and just holding it to that standard.
Yeah. Now, July 1st is a couple of days away from this podcast, which means it's the signing season. Of course, we are pretty much convinced that Tyler Myers is going to Vancouver. There is reports that Cam Talbot is going to sign with Calgary, and after all of those angry, laughing, mocking at tweets at Cam Talbot as an Oiler, Flames fans have suddenly found a way to justify that. Oh, no, he was okay. Look at the stats when he left the Oilers. He was much better. So he'll be fine. He'll be fine. And Oilers fans, it's totally different. Yeah. And then, of course, Oiler fans are freaking out because they're going to get Mike Smith. And I got in trouble on Twitter actually defending Mike Smith. So, but I don't think it's as bad of a signing for the Oilers as people are making it out to be. I think, especially with that defense, if you get a goaltender that can move the puck, yes, it's sometimes an adventure with Mike Smith, but a guy that can do that can help that defense. Anyway, but we are going to make some predictions here of who's going where. So the first one, in terms of the unrestricted free agents, where does Panarin end up?
I think he'll end up in Florida.
With Bob? Is it Panarin and Bob in Florida?
I think so, yeah.
Tyler?
Hi, I don't know. Disappeared there all of a sudden.
Where do you think Panarin ends up?
Oh, I don't have a feel for that one, Kevin. Could be anywhere.
Okay. I'm going to say that he ends up I'm going to say he does not end up in Florida, but he ends up on the Islanders. I think that the Panarin ends up playing on a New York team. Jake Gardiner.
Oof. I haven't heard anything about Jake Gardiner.
Is it, like, you would think that this guy from Toronto would be the entire conversation, but there was Mitch Marner.
I don't know. Like I said, I haven't heard anything. At least with Panarin, you knew who he was meeting with. Left shot, offensive defenseman. I'll say Minnesota. Just a pure blind guess.
For the hell of it.
Well,
yeah, I have no idea what's going to happen with Jake Gardiner. I mean, that's going to be an interesting one. Tyler, do you have an idea?
I don't know if he's a fit in San Jose, but I'm sure they would love to add a stronger D-man still.
Right. How about Matt Duchene? We have assumed for a long time that this will be Nashville, but he did visit Montreal. He did visit Columbus.
I think he'll go back to Columbus.
I think he goes to Nashville. He's got a home there. He's a big country music fan, loves the city. I think that's just where he's had his heart set on for a while, and I don't see why. And now that they've moved out Subban, they've got the cap room for him. So I think that's where he ends up.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Sean on that one. I mean, I guess now the biggest question about it is the offer sheet. So do we get an offer sheet?
No.
I say yes.
Who do you think?
I think I'm actually going to go this far. I believe that the Colorado Avalanche will offer sheet Sebastian Aho, and the Hurricanes will not match.
That is very specific.
Yeah. Well, I have heard the talk about Aho because of the very analytical and numbers based management system that Tom Dundas has sort of put in place since he's since he's bought the Canes, and if there's been a talk that there's a case that you could offer sheet Sebastian Aho in that second tier where you're not giving up 4 first-round picks and you're giving up, I think it's 2 and a second and a third or something like that. And it's still a lot of money. It's still in the 10 million plus range, but you don't have to give up 4 first-round picks for him in return. So, and with the way Colorado's been getting rid of salary, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the move they're looking to make, especially if they strike out on Panarin, because I think they're pushing hard for him.
They have definitely set themselves up to be a big fish player. So to me, that is why I'm kind of thinking that they're going to do it. They can, but they're in a position where they can give up first round picks because they have their cupboard is stocked, so it's not going to hurt them as much.
Yeah. I just don't think it happens. I think that the issue right now, like they're talking about how there's collusion and all that. No, the issue is the fact that if you're looking to get a top end player, it's the price, it's the compensation price that's just way too high. So you're looking at that, and the only other it's always those second tier guys that have always been a little more intriguing for me. Toronto just locked up 2 of them, so there goes that. And I don't see anyone else who's really worth taking that risk right now.
The other team that I could see doing it just to put an FU to them is the Islanders, to Mitch Marner. Just to say FU. This is what we have no intention to match, but we're going to screw you over.
I think Blue's got his mind elsewhere. I don't think he's going to be that petulant.
Come on, be petty!
It would be entertaining.
Yes,
Toronto would go absolutely insane.
Yeah, come on, that would be fun. But yeah, I don't think it. Yeah, it's Marner. It's such an interesting case, but I do see what Elliot Friedman's saying. I think that they're probably going to go with a bridge deal, and I think that might be what a lot of teams do. I could see Calgary doing that, and with Tkachuk as well, considering that the salary cap's going up. There, you may see a lot more bridge deals, which makes this easier to sign, but we'll have to see. Is there anything else we need to talk about before we get on to Cory here?
No, I think we're good.
All right. No. So stay tuned. We will be on our next podcast here. We'll be having Cory Hergott coming on this podcast, talking about Canucks Development Camp, talking about what is going on with the Utica Comets, what he's seen, what they need to go forward. So you can follow Sean at
Beardy Canucks 03
and Tyler at
T Noble, TNOBLE on Twitter.
And me at KEBOLE. So stay tuned. Our next podcast will be Cory Hergott. But thanks for listening. We will talk to you all soon. Bye for now.